I follow like this one of my friends, Boss has like his own real estate company. So I follow it just to support and like they be posting the prices of like what they just sold. It's crazy. Like this one thing
Commission.
in Dorchester just sold. It's like for $800,000 and guess how big it is?
Like 1,500 square feet.
800.
Oh no. In Dorchester too. That's like Dorchester is like an up and coming market. That's not even. Yeah, that's tough, man. Well, in other news, I just signed the application for a
Oh,
apartment
nice.
I'm moving into.
Where is it? In Dorchester?
It's in Dorchester. Yeah. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Without a Roadmap. It's the podcast for product folks who don't have all the answers. My name is Yonas, joined here by my co-host Cameron.
And for once in a while, we don't have another guest, so it's just us two.
Nobody to introduce. It's very strange.
It is very strange. It's been what, about 6 episodes, 6 to 8? Probably all most of this year, right?
Most of most of this year we've had somebody on the show. Most of the folks who listen in like to hear other voices other than ours, as much as we like to hear our own voices. But we've learned a lot. I think we've touched on a lot of different topics. We've spoken to people from product to success to the executive teams at their various startups, and I just felt like it'd be a great opportunity for us to kind of circle back and kind of talk about some of the things going on at Parlor, what's kind of on top of mind for us. And it's good to just have the two of us though.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I think today we wanted to kind of just go over, like Yana said, this kind of what's going on in Parlor and also talk about product adoption. Once you release a feature, that work isn't done. You also have to get your customers or users to actually use the feature so that it's actually worthwhile, that you spent everybody's time and money building that thing. So that's the main topic of our conversation today. And I think based off everyone we've had on the past couple of months, we probably have a lot more insight into product adoption because we've talked to both product and customer success folks. So I feel like we have a wealth of knowledge you've gained from our previous discussions on this stuff.
Yeah. And I think obviously product adoption is, important at every stage of the company and, has been for Parlor as well. But Cam, I figure it might be helpful for you to kind of set the stage as to why it's like particularly important for us now at, kind of the place that we're finding ourselves at Parlor and kind of, what's precipitated this, this newfound interest in this area.
Yeah, I think the main reason is that we now have a lot more customers, thankfully.
Yes.
And so now we have a lot more customers, a lot more people using our product on a daily or weekly basis. And we also we've increased our cadence in which we release features, right? So now we have a bunch of new users, new customers, and we have a bunch of new features within our product. And so being a startup, we want to make sure that our users are getting value out of what we're delivering for them. And so that when we are trying to raise the next round of funding, whenever it may be, we have these referenceable customers that can say, hey, look, they've been releasing all this stuff. I'm enjoying it. I really am bought into the future of this stuff and I love the team and support them. And so hopefully that attracts investors to want to invest in us going forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think the other piece is that for customer satisfaction, it's really important that you're, making sure that not only are you building the things that the customers want, but that you're, making sure that they're actually engaging with them. Even myself as a user of a number of different products, I couldn't tell you the number of times that I went on without actually engaging with functionality that I actually understood as valuable, directly valuable to me. And whether it's a lack of education or missing that email announcement that kind of caused that. At the end of the day, it's really up to the company, the product team, the marketing team to make sure that you're not only aware of this new functionality, but that you're using it and getting value out of it. And so we thought it would be really important to kind of dive deep into the concept of product adoption. That's so important to everything that we do.
Yeah, I think another big factor in that is that we're building a new product, right? And so a lot of this is coming from our internal conversations of what we think is valuable, what we think is important, and what we think can move the business forward. And so when we build these features, we want to make sure that they actually make sense and that we're not just drinking
Need
our
that
own.
validation.
Yeah, not just drinking our own Kool-Aid, because if we're just building stuff and people are like, this is not doing anything that will help me or what I expect to get out of Parlor, we want to make sure we're getting that early feedback. And so if we're needing to change directions in terms of making a pivot or just tweaking some UI stuff within a feature we just released, we get that feedback early rather than building a whole bunch of stuff and waiting 3 or 4 months down the road until we actually realize that no one's using feature XYZ because of either like a minor UI update or they just never understood the value of it as we move forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So really all that it comes down to is that building the features is just step one. Your job is really, it's never done, but it's certainly not finished until those features that you built are adopted. So I think a lot of companies can build their own customized post-release plan or, release checklist. And, we're not going to say anything that we shared today is, an exhaustive list. But Cam, I'm curious, what do you think is the first and most important thing that you do as soon as, maybe as a feature is about to be released or as soon as it is released?
I think one of the most important things, I wouldn't say it's the most, but in my opinion, is having some form of documentation of how the thing actually works, right? Because once it gets to production or once you're starting to train other internal teams on the new feature so that they can go either sell it or then have their customers start using it, people need to know how it works, right? Because if there's not a shared understanding of how the thing you're about to release or what's being worked on works, there's going to be a whole bunch of questions coming in to you as a product person or to you as a team who's responsible for the feature, asking why isn't this working this way? Like, hey, this is a bug, and it could actually not be a bug. It's just how you intended it to be built, but there's just this misalignment of how the feature should work. And so one of the most important things is just having a place where everyone can go view and say, hey, this is how this feature works, and this is how we should train about it, and this is how we should talk about it to external folks, whether those be actual customers or prospects or other people in the sales pipeline. So I think that's one of the most important things is having this documentation, because the product that your users actually interact with, that click around on the internet or in an app, that isn't the only product experience. They also experience how you document things, how they work, right? Because a lot of folks, when they have a question, they don't always want to talk to somebody. They kind of just want to figure it out themselves. Like, I'm one of those people. I'd rather figure it out first if I can, and then ask later if I can't figure it out. And so another aspect of the product experience is your product documentation.
Yeah, and I think another piece there is the kind of the need internally for documentation to help somebody like the customer support or the customer success team easily access information around how things are supposed to work, so that they can quickly relay that information to the customers that they're working with. So making it as easy as possible to basically enable other teams to kind of provide that education that's going to eventually drive that adoption. And I think, like you said, it's really, I think it's attached to the product releases. Right. It's essential. And I'm curious your thoughts on who's responsible for documentations, or in your experience, since you've worked at some larger companies. We can speak from our experience. Like, we're the ones writing the support documentation at Parlor, but does this usually fall on the marketing side? Is there somebody on the more technical sides, maybe at certain companies who are working on this, or is it just flexible?
So there's kind of some other things that go into this. I think one, it depends on the type of product you have, right? So a lot of people just sell like data marts or just back-end tools. So that documentation may fall more on like the developers and technical teams. Other stuff like our products that have both the back end and the front end, it can go down, it can be split between product and engineering teams. But I think ultimately whoever is responsible for shipping that feature should be responsible for doing the documentation, right? Because the ins and out of how it actually works and how everything flows through the system. And so I think that person should be at least responsible for the internal documentation of documenting how things work for other teams to look at internally, to understand how the product works, how you're thinking about things. And then for some companies that are larger, they actually have like documentation teams where the those folks actually take the internal documentation that the product person or whoever is responsible for shipping that feature, product person, product owner, whatever it may be, writes internally, and then the documentation person looks at that and turns that into like external client facing documentation that has like its own web portal and things like that. So I think it depends on the size of your organization. More enterprise people will have that documentation team to handle the external facets of it. And I think in our case, we do it because we're a lot smaller. So we just do both, right? We do both the internal and the external documentation because we're just a smaller team.
Yeah. So I think the core thing is that you make it easily digestible, even for more complex products, just making sure that, the layman can pick it up and run with it and, just covers the bases. So, all right, that's interesting. I'm glad that, that should Parlor continue to grow at this pace, that there's an expectation somebody will eventually take that load on, because it's like, we spent all this time building the feature, and then it's like, oh man, like, all right, now we have to figure out how to talk about it externally. That's a whole other challenge.
It is a lot. It's a great segue into like the product announcements, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So something that I've taken a little bit more ownership of is kind of, what's more external facing than actually announcing the release to your customers. And we've talked a lot in the past about how to best announce new features to your customers. It's ideal that you do it both over email as well as in product if possible, but the actual announcement documentation itself is actually like really different from the actual support documentation, both of which might be external facing. But I think the product release itself, should kind of act as, like an educational and kind of product marketing experience. So not only letting them know what's new, but what's changed and why it's going to change their experience. I think it's, really an opportunity for you to, not just tell them exactly how it works, but, how it's going to make life better for them and get them excited and kind of rallied around this new functionality.
And I think the hardest part about that is doing it in as few as words as you possibly can, right? Because especially for sending things over email, like if you just send a product announcement that has like 2,000 words in the email, no one's going to read that. They're going to look for like
immediately.
Yeah, they're going to look for like they're going to read the first sentence and maybe scan to see if they can see like something that's bolded or highlighted to see to read that, and then they're going to either go into your product when they start their day or whenever they go back to work to log in, or they're just going to ignore it forever, right? So you spend all this time working on the new feature and you have to announce it and you have to like really nail like the 25 words you can use to describe like what's new or what's changed and what's new and how it's going to improve their experience. And you have like 25 words to do that, which is like super hard. It could take you a full day to think of the best 25 words you can.
Yeah. It's between Cam, Casey, who's on our marketing team, and myself. We've definitely spent a day, putting together a product release announcement. We're trying to make it so that it doesn't feel secondary. That I know, I think it's Amazon has the whole idea of building the product announcement before you actually start building the feature, and I think that's a nice goal, like kind of goal to set. We haven't quite gotten there yet, but it's really like just kind of a forcing function for understanding how are you going to how is this going to bring value to the customers, because that's part of the announcement, but also like how are you going to explain that value in as plain and clear terms as possible. And I think that's just one piece of kind of like new product education. There's also kind of building guided walkthroughs that might come with that. There, might be calling things out directly in the product, specific elements. I'm sure most folks are familiar with kind of those tutorial flows in the product that, can kind of accompany something like that to really drive engagement or adoption, especially for something like a brand new portal or a new product area. But I think at the very least, making sure that you're sending an announcement over email, particularly, ideally in product as well. And then, and I think in some cases also we're talking about the idea of kind of building specific training guides, so kind of the next step past an announcement where you're talking about kind of why this is valuable to a customer, but also, how are you going to actually adopt this feature at your organization? And I think that we see that at larger kind of enterprise companies, or even just companies that have kind of a more white glove customer success experience. And I think that's where kind of that internal documentation comes in hand. It's like, should you, provide as much detail as possible internally to the rest of the teams, then they should be able to take that and run with it and make sure that they're kind of providing,
Exactly.
a more kind of catering to each of the individual customers to make sure the
Mhm.
experience that's everybody's rallying around, product adoption essentially.
Yeah, yeah. And like another good thing, or not a good thing, but another point on product announcements is just there's more that goes into it other than just like writing some words, right? Writing some copy. It's all about like the presentation of like the media, the GIFs, the videos, if you're doing voiceovers for the videos, like all that stuff. Cause I know this episode's focused on product adoption, but another thing announcements serve is to like bring in prospects or like get people excited that aren't using your product, whether they're prospects or whether they're other teams within an organization that are your customers that aren't currently using your product, right? So like when they go on LinkedIn and they see that your company just released these features and maybe it's one of those features has been on their wish list and the tool they wanted to buy for a month now, like that gets excitement. And now they're on your website looking at your product, looking at the pricing and trying to have a conversation with you. So it's not always just about writing the announcement copy in a way that's valuable for your customers. It's also about if you're making these external, obviously, if you're making these announcements outside of just to your customers, it's also about making the copy exciting enough where people that have no knowledge of your product can get excited about maybe trying out your product.
Yeah, and that's actually like a lot of Parlor users are doing just that. So being able to recognize which needs were brought up by specific customers, maybe lost leads or prospects, and being able to kind of easily surface up who this new release actually is relevant to, so that you can kind of present them with that. So it's a great opportunity to like re-engage quiet or quiet customers, or folks who may have kind of been lost in the sales process.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Back to your point on like the training guides and like having clear documentation for other teams to kind of just run with and start creating their own content based on how the feature works or how it's going to work. It's also the other aspect of product announcements is following up with your customers to make sure that they actually saw the announcement or they're just aware that there's new features in the product that they may benefit from, right? Because people could
Mhm.
also see the announcement and say, oh, this is cool, but then they have their own busy work days, lives that your product is such like a small fraction of like what goes into their brain for that day that they could just slip their mind. And so it's always nice to like bake in those reminders to have teams like reach out to the customers and say, hey, we released XYZ. We know you've been interested in it, or we think you'll be interested in it. So let's schedule some time to quickly walk through, or you can just do like a quick like Loom video to say, hey, someone to drop in, send you a message about this new feature. Here's how that works. Let me know if you have any questions.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's where, having some sort of like metrics or tracking, be the ability to track product adoption is super important. Being able to quickly see, or even before that, looking at like who's opened my email, who's like clicked through on the email. That's all essential to at least recognizing that somebody has that information. But the next step is looking at product adoption, from the actual reporting side, the analytics, and saying, hey, who are the people who have used this functionality? You could even segment the users who have not yet engaged with this new functionality, and kind of send them different, outreach or product marketing. I think that's something that you kind of build into your longer term product marketing strategy, kind of specific features, and looking at kind of success metrics, and should customers have, be not taking advantage of functionality that you think is valuable to them, making sure
Mm-hmm.
that you segment them appropriately for more targeted outreach and product marketing.
Right. It's like, who are the customers who requested this feature that's now released, and then who are also the users who you think will get a lot of value out of it or should get a lot of value out of it, and tracking whether those people are actually using the feature, and if they aren't, like, why aren't they using the feature? Is it because they're experiencing bugs that are blocking them from using the feature, or is it because it's missing certain other elements that you need to build before they can actually get value out of and start using the new feature you just released?
Hmm. Exactly. And it's more than just, an education and knowledge thing, as well as just being able to, recognize where there might be gaps in the product and the functionality. So it's maybe that,
Expectations.
yeah, it's like sometimes there's an expectation that this functionality is going to provide, a level of value that is not met with, maybe this first iteration 1.1 of this feature. And you're not going to know that unless you engage with the users. And I think that's where kind of the next step in understanding product adoption comes, is that's kind of the collection of feedback step of things. So
Yeah.
at Parlor, we're a feedback company. We're very feedback oriented, but we're also very we work very closely with our customers, and we're able to uncover a lot of feedback in a very direct way. But what we're very common with seeing folks do is send out surveys. Feature fit index is something that we're familiar with and have built in Parlor. But yeah, I'm curious, Cam, your thoughts on other ways and best practices for surfacing up insights about a new release.
Yeah, I think one of the things to be mindful of is like how like tech savvy your users or customers that you're actually talking to are, because they can have their own versions of um, expectations of how something should work, especially since we sell to like product people. And they can have their own, like, they sometimes try to like product your product and say, oh, you should have built this, or this is how I would have built it. And it's always good to keep in the back of your mind that like they're your customers, they're your users. And so like to not get immediately defensive when somebody offers you feedback or suggestions on ways to improve your product. Because you spent however long, weeks, months, it could be quarters, years, like developing a feature. And then the minute you ask for some feedback, people are just absolutely just roasting you, like saying, why didn't you do this? And it's like, oh, that's a good point.
Yeah,
And so
it's like,
it's
that's my
like,
baby. It's tough. It's
yeah.
tough, man. You spent all that time working on it.
Right. And it can be something like super obvious. That's actually a really good point that just slipped your mind because you've been so in the weeds for so long
Mhm.
about this one feature that you just completely miss something so obvious. I don't know, it could be like a command shortcut or something like that. I don't know. Something super obvious that didn't even cross your mind that your customer brings up within the first 2 seconds. And like, it's just always important to like not immediately become defensive once you're getting that feedback, whether that's from your customers or whether it's from like the other teams within your company, right? So like the sales team, the customer success team could be reviewing the product with you as you're trying to train them, and they're just asking you these questions. It's like, it's important to not get defensive. So that's probably one of the best things I would recommend. It's super hard to do because you're just in the wings. It's your baby, like you said. It's your little pup. And once it's out in the wild, it's hard to not get defensive over what everyone's working so hard to do.
Yeah. And what I found is actually easier sometimes, and I more programmatically, I think of it as the thing that I would do before I reach out or say, do any surveying directly, is just reviewing like user sessions. There's plenty of tools out there like Full Story and LogRocket that you can use so that you can actually kind of view recorded sessions of your users, and by simply just kind of saying like, hey, this show me sessions from users who have visited this URL, and that URL is the where how you access this new
Yeah,
functionality, or
right.
has engaged with it, and you can quickly see who's in, how they're interacting with it, who's interacting with it, and before needing to actually speak directly with folks, you can say, oh, we missed that, oh, this is a very clunky
Yeah,
UX, and learn a lot from that. And really the goal of that is to funnel that into what I think of as kind of like the last step in the process of pushing adoption is iteration. It's like,
right, right.
how do we continue to improve upon what we already have so that people can derive even more value, and
Right.
push
And like
adoption
a
even
big key
further.
of that is like putting yourself in the user shoes, right? So when you're either doing QA or just kind of walking people through the product, you're going to know like the ins and outs of how everything should work. And you get to like put yourself in the mindset of somebody that has no context. It's their first time seeing the feature. They don't know how it works. They don't know how it relates to other things. They don't know all the different bugs and design reviews that went into making the feature. So it's like putting yourself in that shoes with no context and saying, all right, this is my first time using the feature. What do I think is wrong with it? What do I think can be improved? And what do I think is great at? And that's kind of a way to, like you said, to push iteration and also to reduce the defensiveness that you may have when people are giving you feedback on the new feature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that you have to kind of remove yourself from the process. It's not personal, and actually I really like it when people do take strong stances when giving feedback about the product, because that's really, that shows me that they care. And at the end of the day, you want users who are excited about your product as you are. And we're lucky that we have that, by nature of just working closely with folks and showing them how excited we get about things. We do get a lot of enthusiastic feedback. And I think that's kind of around all of this is trying to, as a product person, trying to, be as close to the users as possible so you can empathize with them, and, so you understand their needs as closely as possible. And we're very fortunate that, a good sizable portion of our user population are also product people. So it's, we're oftentimes just, empathizing for ourselves. And that definitely makes things easier.
For sure. Yeah. And to wrap things up on like the whole product adoption episode, to me, I think the first step is just getting the shared understanding across the entire team, if possible, of how the feature actually works before it goes out and is released to your customers, just so everybody's aware of how it works. Maybe there's some bugs that you're going to choose to fix in the later release just because you wanted to get the feature out quicker. And just so people aren't writing into support, or your sales success support teams aren't just pinging you in Slack with 1,000 messages of like, why isn't this working? It's like, oh, because we didn't build it that way. So that's good feedback, and we'll get it into a future release.
Yeah. And with that, I'd love to hear from folks about their kind of post-release product adoption playlist. Let us know if ours sounds similar to yours, if you're doing things differently. We'd love to, learn from others, even if we don't have a guest on the show.
Right. And be sure to smash that subscribe button.
We'll see y'all in a couple weeks.